The Nexus orbital hummed with life, a sprawling space station circling a bright yellow star in the neutral zone between human and alien territories. Its metal corridors echoed with the chatter of dozens of species, from the feathered traders of Calith to the shimmering diplomats of Vorin. In the repair bay, Jake wiped sweat from his brow, his hands greasy from fixing a busted plasma conduit. At 28, with sandy hair and a lean, wiry frame, he was no stranger to hard work. Earth had sent him here as part of a tech exchange program, and he'd spent 6 months proving humans could keep this chaotic station running. The air was thick with the hum of machinery and the faint tang of oil. Jake liked it here, quiet, away from the bustling trade decks. He hefted a wrench, tightening a bolt, when the bay doors slid open with a hiss. A Vorin female stepped in, her pale blue skin catching the overhead lights. Her name was Lila, a technician he'd seen around but never spoken to. She had sharp golden eyes and a slim build, her dark hair tied back in a practical braid. She carried a toolkit, clearly here to work. "Hey," Jake called, nodding politely. "Bay's all yours after I finish this." Lila glanced at him, her nostrils flaring slightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice smooth with a faint trill, typical of Vorin's. She set her tools down near a flickering console and started tinkering. Jake went back to his conduit, sweat dripping down his neck as he strained against a stubborn valve. The station's climate controls kept it cool for most species, but humans ran hot, especially during heavy labor. Minutes passed in comfortable silence, the only sounds the clank of tools and the soft buzz of the station. Then, a sharp gasp broke the quiet. Jake turned to see Lila clutching her stomach, her golden eyes wide. "You okay?" he asked, dropping his wrench and stepping closer. "I don't know," she stammered, her voice trembling. Before Jake could react, her body shuddered. Her chest swelled, straining her tight jumpsuit, and her hips widened dramatically, the fabric stretching to its limit. Her backside rounded out, giving her a curvaceous shape that hadn't been there moments ago. Jake blinked, stunned. "What the heck is happening to you?" Lila's blue skin flushed a deeper shade. "It's my body. Something's triggering it." She stumbled back, arms flailing as she tried to cover herself. Her jumpsuit creaked, barely holding together. Jake grabbed a tarp from a nearby crate and tossed it to her. "Here, wrap this around you. We'll figure this out." She caught it, draping it over her shoulders like a cloak. "Thank you," she said, her breathing ragged. "This shouldn't be happening. Vorins don't change like this unless," she trailed off, her eyes darting to Jake. "It's you. Your smell." "My smell?" Jake raised an eyebrow, wiping his sweaty hands on his pants. "You mean my sweat?" She nodded, mortified. "Human pheromones, they're doing this. I've read about rare reactions in old texts, but I never thought," she gestured helplessly at her transformed figure. "It's like I'm going into heat, but it's not supposed to work this way." Jake scratched his head, processing the absurdity. "Okay, weirdest day on the job so far. Look, we can't let anyone see you like this, not yet. Station's got cameras everywhere." He glanced around, spotting a maintenance hatch. "There's a service tunnel behind that panel. We can get you somewhere private." Lila hesitated, then nodded. "My quarters are in the Vorin wing. If we can reach them," she took a shaky step, wobbling under her new proportions. Jake moved to her side, offering an arm. "Lean on me. I've got you." Together, they slipped through the hatch into a dim, narrow tunnel lined with pipes and wires. The station's underbelly was a maze Jake knew well from months of repairs. He guided Lila, keeping an eye out for security drones. Her scent filled the tight space, a mix of something floral and electric, oddly pleasant despite the chaos. "Why's this happening?" Jake asked as they moved. "You said something about old texts." Lila steadied herself against the wall. Voron biology is sensitive. Long ago, we adapted to certain triggers, mates, seasons. But that was controlled, ceremonial. This, she waved at herself, is wild, ancient. Like my body thinks you're, she stopped, embarrassed. Thinks I'm what? Jake pressed, curious despite himself. A compatible mate, she muttered, avoiding his gaze. It's ridiculous. Humans and Vorons aren't even from the same system. Jake chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. Guess I'm flattered. But we need answers. You got any scientist friends who can explain this? Lila nodded slowly. Maybe. There's an elder in the Voron delegation, Core. He knows our history. But if he finds out, her voice dropped. This could be trouble. Vorons don't like surprises. Too late for that, Jake said, peering around a corner. The tunnel exit was close, leading to the residential decks. We'll talk to him, but first, let's get you hidden. My place is closer, empty, no cameras. You okay with that? She studied him, golden eyes narrowing, then softened. Yes. Thank you, Jake. They reached his small quarters, a cramped room with a bunk, a desk, and spare parts scattered everywhere. Lila sank onto the bunk, still clutching the tarp. Jake grabbed a spare jumpsuit from his locker. Try this. Might fit better. As she changed behind a partition, Jake's comm buzzed. A stern voice crackled through, Technician Jake, report to command. Unscheduled maintenance detected in your sector. He cursed under his breath. Someone had noticed their exit. Stay here, he told Lila. I'll handle this. Lock the door behind me. She peeked out, her new curves barely contained by the oversized jumpsuit. Be careful. If they suspect anything. I've got this, Jake said with a grin. Humans are good at talking their way out of messes. He stepped into the corridor, mind racing. Whatever was happening to Lila, it wasn't just a fluke, it felt bigger, like a puzzle with missing pieces. As he headed to command, a shadow moved in the distance, a tall Voron in ornate robes, watching him. Jake's gut tightened. Trouble was already here. Jake strode through the gleaming corridors of Nexus Orbital, his boots clanging against the metal floor. The summons from command buzzed in his mind, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Lila, hidden in his quarters. Her transformation, wild, sudden, and tied to his sweat, was a mystery that gnawed at him. He'd always been the type to fix things, whether it was a busted engine or a broken truce, and this felt like something he couldn't just walk away from. The station's artificial lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows as he neared the command deck. The control room was a hive of activity, screens flashing with data, officers barking orders, and a mix of species scurrying about. A human supervisor, a gruff woman named Mara, spotted him immediately. Jake, she snapped, her arms crossed. What's this about unscheduled maintenance? You know protocol, every move gets logged. Jake flashed his easy grin, the one that had gotten him out of trouble back on Earth. Just a quick fix in the bay, Mara. Conduit was leaking plasma. Didn't want to bother you with paperwork for something that small. He kept his tone light, casual, but his palms were sweaty. Lying wasn't his strong suit, but he couldn't let them dig deeper, not with Lila involved. Mara's eyes narrowed, but she waved him off. Fine. Log it next time, or I'll have your hide. Dismissed. Jake nodded and slipped out before she could change her mind. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. That robed Voron he'd seen in the corridor, tall, imposing, with eyes like cold gold, lingered in his memory. Something told him this wasn't over. Back in his quarters, he found Lila pacing, her borrowed jumpsuit stretched tight over her altered frame. She'd tied the tarp around her waist like a makeshift skirt, but it did little to hide the dramatic curves her body had taken on. You're back, she said, relief softening her voice. What happened? Talked my way out of it, Jake replied, locking the door behind him. But we've got bigger problems. Someone's watching, Voran, fancy robes. You think it's that elder you mentioned? Lila's golden eyes widened. Core. If he's here, he knows something's wrong. He's one of our historians, keeps the old secrets. We need to find out what's happening to me before he does. She hugged herself, her blue skin shimmering faintly in the dim light. This isn't just embarrassing, it could mean trouble for both our people. Jake nodded, his mind already racing. Then we dig. You said old texts might explain this. Where do we find them? The station archives, Lila said. Restricted section, Voran records. I've got clearance as a technician, but it's risky. If Core's watching, he'll have eyes there too. Risk's my middle name, Jake said with a wink, though his stomach twisted. Well, it's actually Lee, but close enough. Let's move. They waited until the station's night cycle, when most crew were asleep or off shift. The corridors were quiet, save for the hum of the environmental systems. Lila led the way, her steps unsteady but determined, while Jake kept watch. They reached the archive wing, a towering chamber lined with glowing data crystals and holoscreens. Lila swiped her wristband at the door, and it slid open with a soft beep. Inside, the air was cool and still. Crystals pulsed with faint light, each holding centuries of Voran knowledge. Lila moved to a console, her fingers flying over the controls. I'll search for anything on spontaneous transformations. Keep an eye out. Jake nodded, standing guard near the entrance. His eyes scanned the shadows, every creak of the station making him jump. Minutes ticked by, then Lila let out a sharp breath. Found something, she whispered, pulling up a holodisplay. Ancient Voran script floated in the air, alongside grainy images of blue-skinned figures and humans. What's that? Jake asked, stepping closer. Lila's voice trembled with excitement. It's a legend, thousands of years old. Says Vorans once faced extinction. Our females stopped cycling, couldn't reproduce. Then a ship crashed on our world, human survivors. Their pheromones woke our biology, triggered changes like mine. Saved us. Jake stared at the display, a chill running down his spine. So my sweat's some kind of alien aphrodisiac? Not exactly, Lila said, scrolling further. It's rare, only certain humans trigger it. A chemical match. But our leaders buried it. Called it myth, banned the truth. Didn't want to admit we owed humans anything. Before Jake could respond, a shadow loomed in the doorway. Core stepped in, his robes rustling, his golden eyes blazing. Lila, he said, his voice deep and cold. You disgrace us. Sneaking here, with him. He pointed at Jake, disgust curling his lip. Lila straightened, defiance flashing in her eyes. I'm finding answers, Elder Core. My body changed, because of him. It's not disgrace, it's science. Core's gaze flicked to Jake. Humans are chaos. This, he gestured at Lila's curves, is forbidden. You'll return to Vorith with me. Now. Jake stepped forward, hands clenched. She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to. We're figuring this out together. Core sneered. You have no say, human. He tapped a device on his wrist, and an alarm blared. Footsteps echoed, station security was coming. Time to go, Jake muttered, grabbing Lila's arm. He spotted a vent in the wall, yanking it open with a grunt. In here. They scrambled into the tight space, Lila's new shape making it a squeeze. Jake pulled the grate shut behind them just as security drones whirred into the archive. Crawling through the vent, his heart pounded. Where to now? He asked. Lila's voice was grim. Anywhere but here. Core won't stop. But I saw something else in the data. A signal, from a derelict Voran ship, out past the asteroid belt. It might hold more answers. Jake grinned despite the danger. Then that's our next stop. Hold tight, I've got a plan. They emerged in a deserted cargo bay, the station's underbelly dark and cluttered. Jake spotted an old maintenance shuttle, its hull dented but intact. Ever flown one of these? He asked, already climbing aboard. Lila shook her head. No, but I can learn. Good enough, Jake said, firing up the controls. The shuttle sputtered to life, and he patched into the station's grid, faking a routine supply run. As they slipped out of the docking bay, the asteroid belt loomed ahead, a jagged sea of rock hiding their target. Behind them, Core's voice crackled over the comms, ordering pursuit. Jake glanced at Lila, her golden eyes reflecting the shuttle's lights. Ready for a wild ride? She managed a small smile. With you? Always. The shuttle streaked into the darkness, the signal from the derelict pulsing faintly on the screen. Whatever waited there, Jake knew one thing, he and Lila were in this together, and no elder, no station, no galaxy would tear them apart. The maintenance shuttle rattled as it wove through the asteroid belt, its engines groaning under the strain. Jake gripped the controls, his knuckles white, steering around jagged chunks of rock that loomed like silent giants in the void. The faint signal from the derelict Voran ship blinked on the cracked navigation screen, guiding them deeper into the chaos. Beside him, Lila sat tense, her golden eyes darting between the viewport and the sensors. Her transformed body, still wrapped in Jake's oversized jumpsuit, shifted uncomfortably in the tight co-pilot seat. Almost there, Jake said, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his forehead. Just keep an eye on that signal. We're flying blind otherwise. Lila nodded, her fingers tapping the console. It's stronger now, 5 kilometers out. But the asteroids, they're moving faster than they should. Jake glanced out the viewport. She was right. The rocks weren't just drifting, they were spinning, caught in some unseen current. Great, he muttered. A cosmic blender. Hang on. He yanked the shuttle into a sharp dive, dodging a boulder the size of a house. The hull screeched as smaller debris scraped against it, but the old ship held. Jake's years fixing machinery on Nexus Orbital had taught him one thing, even the junkiest tech could surprise you if you knew how to push it. The shuttle shuddered, then leveled out, the signal now a bright pulse dead ahead. There, Lila breathed, pointing. A shape emerged from the shadows, a massive Voran vessel, its hull cracked and dark, half buried in a cratered asteroid. Its design was ancient, all sharp angles and faded blue plating, unlike the sleek ships of modern Vorans. That's it. The source. Jake eased the shuttle closer, finding a jagged docking port. No power readings, he said, scanning the derelict. We'll have to go in cold. You sure about this? Lila met his gaze, her expression fierce. We need answers, Jake. Core's hiding something, about me, about us. This ship might tell us why. Fair enough, Jake replied, powering down the engines. Let's suit up. They pulled on EVA suits from the shuttle storage, bulky, patched-up things that smelled of stale air. Lila struggled to fit her enhanced curves into hers, but Jake helped adjust the straps, keeping it professional despite the awkward closeness. With helmets sealed, they tethered to the shuttle and floated out into the void, the derelict's hull glinting faintly under the distant starlight. The airlock was stuck, its mechanism rusted shut. Jake pried it open with a crowbar, muscles straining until it gave with a dull clang. Inside, the ship was a tomb, corridors dim, air stale even through their suit filters. Bioluminescent moss clung to the walls, casting an eerie glow. Lila led the way, her technician instincts kicking in as she traced old power conduits. "This is pre-spaceflight Voron," she said, her voice crackling over the comms. "Before we joined the galaxy. Whatever's here, it's ancient." They reached a central chamber, its ceiling domed and cracked. In the middle sat a console, flickering with faint energy, surrounded by shattered data crystals. Jake brushed dust off a panel, revealing carvings, Vorons and humans, side by side, hands clasped. "Look at this," he said, awed. "Your legend, it's real." Lila joined him, her gloved hand tracing the images. "More than real. This was a pact. Humans didn't just save us, they worked with us." She activated the console, and a hollow projection sputtered to life, an old Voron, his voice weak but clear. "To our allies," the recording began. "The human spark reignited our kind. Their essence, carried in breath and sweat, awoke what we'd lost. Together, we built this ark to preserve our bond. But fear grew, our leaders hid you, erased you. If you hear this, know the truth lives here." The hollow flickered out, but a hum filled the chamber. A device rose from the floor, a sleek, egg-shaped pod glowing with blue light. Lila approached, hesitant. "It's alive," she said. "Some kind of biotech." Before Jake could stop her, she touched it. Energy surged, arcing into her suit. She gasped, stumbling back, but her body didn't falter, it stabilized. The wild changes slowed, her curves settling into a stronger, more balanced form. She flexed her arms, marveling. "I feel powerful. It's amplifying me." Jake grinned. "Guess I'm not the only spark around here." He turned to the console, his mechanic's mind buzzing. "If this ship's an arc, it's got a core. I can get it running, maybe send a signal, show the galaxy what we found." He set to work, pulling panels and rewiring circuits with practiced ease. Lila helped, her new strength letting her lift heavy debris he couldn't budge alone. Hours passed, their teamwork seamless, until the core thrummed to life, lights flickering across the ship. Jake patched into the comms array, prepping a broadcast. "This'll wake everyone up," he said. But then the sensors blared, a fleet of shuttles closing in, station security and Voron enforcers. Core's voice cut through the static, "Lila, surrender the human. This ends now." Jake cursed, slamming a fist on the console. "They tracked us. We're sitting ducks." Lila's golden eyes blazed. "Not yet. That pod, it's not just for me. It's a bridge. If you link with it, we could fight back." Jake hesitated, then nodded. He stepped into the pod's glow, energy washing over him. It didn't change his body like Lila's, but he felt it, a jolt of clarity, strength, a tie to her he couldn't explain. Their minds synced, her thoughts brushing his like a whisper. "Whoa," he said, stepping out. "That's intense." "Bioenergetic resonance," Lila said, awed. "The old Alliance tech. We're connected now, really connected." Core's shuttles landed, boots clanging on the hull. Jake hit the broadcast button, sending the holo recording galaxy-wide. "Let's see how they handle the truth," he said, grabbing a makeshift weapon, a jagged pipe. Lila stood beside him, her enhanced frame radiating power. The airlock burst open, Core striding in with armed Vorons. "You've defiled our past," he snarled. "This ship stays silent." Jake raised the pipe, grinning. "Too late, old man. The galaxy's listening." Lila stepped forward, her voice firm. "And we're not hiding anymore." The chamber tensed, a standoff brewing. The broadcast hummed, its signal unstoppable, as Jake and Lila braced for the fight. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, human grit and Voron strength, a bond forged in sweat and starlight. The derelict Voron ship trembled as Core's enforcers stormed the chamber, their boots echoing off the ancient hull. Jake tightened his grip on the jagged pipe, his heart pounding but his resolve steady. Beside him, Lila stood tall, her enhanced body radiating strength from the biotech pod's amplification. The broadcast hummed in the background, the old Voron's voice spilling the truth of their forgotten alliance across the galaxy. Kor's golden eyes blazed with fury, his ornate robes swirling as he pointed at them. "You've unleashed chaos," he snarled, his voice cutting through the tension. "This ends here, human filth and traitor alike." Jake smirked, adrenaline sharpening his senses. "Chaos? Nah, just history catching up. You can't bury it anymore." Lila stepped forward, her blue skin glowing faintly in the dim light. "Elder Kor, you've lied to our people. Humans saved us once. They're not our shame, they're our strength." Kor's enforcers, 6 Vorons in sleek armor, wielding energy batons, fanned out, ready to strike. Jake glanced at Lila, their bioenergetic bond buzzing like a live wire between them. He could feel her determination, her trust in him, and it fueled his own. "Got a plan?" he whispered. "Hold them off," she replied, her voice low. "I'll get the ship's defenses online. That core you fixed, it's more than a beacon." Jake nodded, stepping into the fray as the first enforcer lunged. He swung the pipe, connecting with the baton in a shower of sparks. The Voron grunted, stumbling back, but another charged in, aiming for his legs. Jake dodged, years of scrapping in tight station corridors giving him an edge. He wasn't a soldier, but he was stubborn, and humans didn't go down easy. Lila darted to the console, her enhanced strength letting her rip open a sealed panel. She worked fast, rerouting power from the core. The ship groaned, lights flickering as dormant systems woke. Jake parried another blow, his arms aching, but he kept the enforcers at bay, buying her time. Kor watched, his expression darkening with each passing second. Outside, the galaxy stirred. The broadcast reached Nexus Orbital, human diplomats scrambling to respond. On Voron ships, crews muttered, old legends resurfacing. The signal even pinged Earth's outposts, sparking debates. Jake and Lila had lit a match, and it was spreading fast. A low hum built in the chamber, the floor vibrating. Lila slammed a switch, and turrets, hidden in the walls for centuries, whirred to life, their barrels glowing blue. "Down," she shouted. Jake dropped as energy bolts streaked overhead, forcing the enforcers to scatter. Kor ducked behind a crystal pillar, his calm cracking. "Nice trick," Jake said, scrambling to her side. "What else this thing got?" "Enough to make a stand," Lila replied, her golden eyes fierce. "But they'll call reinforcements. We need help." Jake grinned, an idea sparking. "Then let's turn this wreck into a fortress." He grabbed a toolkit from the shuttle, diving back into the core. If he could boost the shields, reroute power to the hull, they might hold out. Lila guarded him, her strength fending off enforcers who got too close. Together, they were a team, human ingenuity and Voron power in perfect sync. Hours blurred into a frantic dance of repairs and combat. Jake patched the shields, the derelict's exterior shimmering as energy barriers snapped up. Lila manned the turrets, her reflexes honed by the bond. Kor retreated to his shuttle, barking orders, but the signal kept broadcasting, unstoppable. Then, a new sound cut through, a human voice on the comms. "This is Captain Elise, Nexus Orbital Security. Jake, you alive in there?" Jake laughed, relief flooding him. "Barely. Got a situation here, Voron Elder wants us quiet. Could use backup." "On it," Elise said. "Your broadcasts got everyone talking. We're mobilizing. Hold tight." The tide shifted. Human shuttles arrived, flanked by a few Voron ships, defectors who'd heard the truth and turned on Kor. The Elder's forces faltered, caught in a pincer. Jake and Lila fortified their position, the derelict now a glowing bastion amid the asteroids. Kor's shuttle launched an assault, energy blasts pounding the shields, but Jake's patchwork held. Inside, Kor stormed back into the chamber, alone, his enforcers pinned outside. "You've ruined everything," he hissed, drawing a ceremonial blade. "Our purity, our pride." "Your lies," Lila cut in, stepping between him and Jake. "You hid our past to control us. No more." She lunged, her enhanced speed a blur, pinning Kor's arm before he could strike. The blade clattered to the floor, and he slumped, defeated. Jake joined her, breathing hard. "It's over, Kor. The galaxy knows now." Reinforcements poured in, humans in tactical gear, Vorons in civilian colors, a mix of curiosity and awe on their faces. Captain Elise strode forward, her dark hair pulled tight. "Hell of a mess, Jake. You've got diplomats screaming and half the station on alert." "Worth it," Jake said, glancing at Lila. "Right?" She nodded, her hand brushing his. "Worth it." Kor was taken into custody, his authority crumbling as Voron defectors vouched for the broadcast. The chamber filled with chatter, questions, plans, hope. Later, as the dust settled, Jake and Lila stood by the console, the pod's glow fading. "What now?" he asked. Lila smiled, her curves now a natural part of her, her strength undeniable. "We build. Show them what humans and Vorons can do together. Like the old alliance." Jake pulled her close, their bond warm and steady. "Partners, then. Galaxy's not ready for us." Beyond the derelict, Nexus Orbital buzzed with activity. Diplomats drafted treaties, scientists begged to study the biotech, and crews salvaged the ship. Jake and Lila became symbols, proof that differences could unite, that a spark of sweat could ignite a revolution. The station's gym got a new rule, shower mandatory, with a winking nod to their story. As the twin suns of a distant system rose over the asteroid belt, casting light on the derelict, Jake reflected on it all. He'd come to Nexus to fix machines, not start a movement. But with Lila by his side, he'd found something bigger: purpose, connection, a future worth fighting for. Humanity's grit and Voron resilience had rewritten the stars, and this was just the beginning.